My name's Nasha. I'm one of the co-founders at Citizen Health. And for me, Citizen is both professional and personal. I have an 8-year-old daughter who suffers from a rare disease called FOXG1 syndrome. And I also co-lead our patient advocacy group, the FOXG1 Research Foundation. We have been at this for 7 years, and now 7 years later are taking our first gene therapy, a life-altering gene therapy, into clinical trials. So it's been a journey, and within this journey, we really learned firsthand how difficult it was to access rich clinical data on rare disease patients. It's really hard when it's such a small population and there's very little published, there's very little NIH funding behind these rare diseases to get a good sense of just what's the trajectory of the disease. And without that, you really can't develop a drug. You don't know what endpoints you're going to test in a clinical trial. And so learning this firsthand and then speaking to other biotech companies and other patient advocacy groups, I realized this is a problem everyone faces. And also there's just a lack of information for us as caregivers and patients. So, my reason for being at Citizen is very personal. This industry needs to disrupt the way we collect medical data, needs to disrupt the way we're getting therapies developed for rare diseases. Needs to disrupt. Only 5% of rare diseases even have a treatment, and these are life-threatening conditions. So that's what really brings me to Citizen and why I'm so passionate about our work.
My name is Farid. I'm also co-founder and our CEO here at Citizen Health. I got into the healthcare space back in 2017. I'd co-founded a previous company, also called Citizen, spelled with 3 I's, that was focused on helping patients get access to all of their medical records, genomic, genetic information, imaging, anything and everything related to your care, with the goal of really making sure that you can have the entire picture of your health in proverbially, in your pocket. Whether you're going and seeing a new specialist, whether you're trying to find a clinical trial, whether you're trying to find the best treatment for yourself. But effectively, the concept was that if we want to get to precision medicine and personalized care, you have to be able to characterize and understand the individual patient at a very granular level. And the infrastructure and technology for that didn't exist. And so that's what we set out to build. We were focused mainly in the oncology space. I met Nasha in 2018 when she was a very early member of the team. And it became evident that this was a huge challenge in rare diseases where there was a complete dearth of this information. I always say, not for me, Nasha is my muse in terms of the motivation for why we need to build what we're doing. Because in the rare disease space, there's 2 paradigms that we see. One is what Nasha was talking about on the drug development side, where if you think of almost every aspect of drug development past the basic science, everything is a derivative of how do you get access to the patient you're trying to serve or understand enough information about them to help inform how you design your trial, how we design a therapy. And so in building a platform where all of that is available in one place, we can make a lot of headway in reducing timelines to bring therapies to market. The second piece, though, that I'm particularly very passionate about is what I see Nasha and thousands of other caregivers, parents, patients do, which is in rare diseases, patients and families actually know more about the condition and how to navigate it than any expert does. And so you and I might be used to going to the doctor and getting advice. The paradigm for most rare disease patients is they go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't know what the disease is or what next steps to take. And so if you look at the power of someone like Nasha being able to share her experience, everything that she's navigated with patients who are on that same journey, but maybe a few months or a few years behind her, there is immense life-changing value in being able to do that. And so we don't want to only use this data just for drug development, but also to be able to provide patients with an aggregated data set of every single patient journey so that you can learn from the experiences of others, whether that's identifying the specialist to see, the drug to try, how to navigate insurance, what summer camp to send your kid to, but really being able to use the power of data and community to transform their experience. I think our central goal is to create a space where rare disease families and patients are able to engage with one another, be able to get access to knowledge and resources that help them in their day-to-day navigation of care, and in aggregate to also be able to share their experiences with industry partners and researchers who are developing therapies for the conditions that they're trying to navigate. So we think that there is a two-sided platform that is powered by data and community that allows us to be able to do that. And our mission is really to be able to drive relief for those patients and families through that experience.
I was thinking about this last night, actually, that when I started the journey, I began going to conferences, pharma conferences. And whenever I would approach someone in pharma, biotech, one of the first questions they would ask me is, do you have a patient registry? Do you have a natural history study? And at the time, I didn't have either. And when I started to research what are these things and reaching out to vendors, I was getting bills of $100,000 to build a patient registry that would be IRB protected. And, for a new foundation and ultra rare disease, that is a really high fee. And it doesn't also make sense. I mean, a registry is getting a contact registry and then having the ability to send out surveys, for example. And so as a first step, I did that. And then once I did that, I realized that, hey, that wasn't good enough for pharma. The registry information wasn't enough. They needed natural history data, which is information that clinicians are reporting. And as I started to investigate, what do I have to do that now? I realized I had to pay different academic centers around the country to stand up sites. I would have to convince our families that most of us, our kids are in wheelchairs, they're having seizures every day, they have scoliosis, they're not able to travel, especially when they're traveling just to answer the same questions that they already answer when they go in for their neurological checkups. And so when I started to look at this model, it just doesn't work for rare diseases. And it's a big reason why rare diseases, especially ultra rare conditions, which are the majority of rare diseases, do not get studied. And so myself as a mom, trying to understand the space, trying to figure out drug development, which is already over my pay grade, and then just having so much difficulty getting patient data, it was very daunting. And Citizen has helped, it's helped my foundation tremendously from the very beginning of just getting our patients organized, being able to have a contact registry, being able to collect their medical records, and then being able to extract information from those records to create a natural history study that we are now publishing, and being able to offer that to pharma to say, we understand the longitudinal history of our patients. And we have over 100 patients in our Citizen Natural History Study. That would have taken, with over 10 years of data, I mean, that would have taken me 10 years and, over $10 million to do that work and to get to the level that we have at Citizen, which we were able to do within a year. So these are like really disruptive and are absolutely necessary. So myself as a mom navigating this, now I have a platform and a tool that can accelerate drug development and really de-risk my condition for pharma.
I think what's central to us is that we build for the patient and for the family. And if you looked at our product roadmap, if you looked at what our internal focus areas are, if you looked at even our business model, what we've traditionally seen is that there's many people in sort of this real world data space that are using existing data that has already been generated to inform scientific questions. To your point, there's lots of registries out there that will let you manage your community and we'll send surveys out to patients to be able to collect information. But Nasha, as a mom, she rarely gets anything back from that. And so you imagine this concept where you have dozens, hundreds of families and patients that are contributing this very rich information about their patient experience, about their medical journey. We aggregate all of that so that a scientist or a researcher can answer a question. And we want to continue to accelerate that. But why can't you turn that same knowledge base around to the patient and allow them to be able to answer questions that they may have that could benefit them today, while we are taking the months and years that it takes to develop the therapy that could be a potential cure or transform their quality of life. So a very simple example, I remember Nasha called me about a year and a half ago, and her daughter Amara had started to she had started to notice new symptoms that Amara was showing that she hadn't previously seen. And now keep in mind that Nasha runs the Fox G1 Foundation. She's effectively learned the science. She knows as much about the disease as anyone. And she couldn't figure out that, hey, for Amara at this age, why is she having this symptom? And is there a specialist I should see? Or what are other parents doing that have seen the symptom? We can answer that question through our information. We can answer that question through data because we know everything about Amara. We have 100 other Fox G1 families at the time that were on the platform. So we could use that aggregated data to give guidance back to Nasha to be able to say, hey, look, here are the top symptoms that are seen at this age. Here are some of the medications that you might want to consider talking to your doctor about. But we can take it one step further because we have a direct relationship with the patients and the families. We could then even connect Nasha with two families that she probably already knows, but doesn't know are the ones to connect with to say, hey, they're the ones who have dealt with this exact same issue. And you can have a conversation with them and they can help you navigate what the next steps are. And so that's the day-to-day journey that these parents and families are dealing with, but they don't have access to that aggregated data to answer those questions or to that knowledge base. They don't have the ability to find the right patient at the right time that can help them figure out, hey, turn left, don't turn right. And so that's the type of experience that I don't know anybody else that is really building it, where you are one taking all of this data and characterizing the individual patient, but then really leveraging the power of what AI is best at, which is helping to navigate huge swaths of information, so that we can use that to inform very precise and personalized steps for the individual family, while in aggregate, helping the drug developers move a whole lot faster and be able to get these therapies to market sooner.
That's so interesting when Farid mentioned that connecting to patients, other patients within my disease is really important. But what I have found actually is that actually I meet mothers with other rare diseases, but our children end up having very similar symptoms, and they end up being the people that I go to more than anyone. So in an entire disease category, if you look at just neurodevelopmental conditions, most of our children have very, very similar conditions, and we're prescribing our kids very similar medications. But when I look at where we normally go to talk to each other, we're going to Facebook, where we have individual communities for each of our diseases and nothing that's an umbrella, for example. So we're really going through the same things. And then in terms of all rare diseases, we're all challenged with how do we get resources? How do we, deal with the special education environment at our schools? How do we deal with entitlements? We're all going through those same things. And then we're all going through the same mental health challenges, honestly. How do you cope with a child or a family member that's going through something like this? How do you take care of yourself in that process? So there's so many similarities within just rare diseases itself.
Well, I think there's a corollary to what Nasha was saying in terms of like the patient and the caregiver experience, right? She talked about how even though the conditions are different, um, similar symptoms, similar life challenges that we're dealing with. So now if you look at it from a data perspective, the vast majority of those 10,000 diseases are genetically driven. And a lot of those conditions are what are called monogenic, which means that to the extent of our knowledge today, there is a single mutation there's a single mutation that's actually causing the disease. So in the case of Amara, it's FOXG1. It is that single gene that is, causing the disease or the condition. If you think about a strategy of how do we start to solve for the really, really complex conditions like, let's say, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or dementia. The reasons these are so difficult is there are polygenic conditions. There is a lot of different factors that are contributing to that symptomology and to that disease. And so a big part of how we think about it is if we can start to solve for each of these monogenic conditions and deeply understand FOXG1 and SYNGAP1, and let's say all of these other pediatric epilepsy conditions or neurodevelopmental conditions, when you look at that data set in aggregate, you can start to understand broad-based epilepsy at a level of depth that we never previously could. And so there's a very clear way in which we think about how we manage these data sets that are very, very deep at the individual monogenic level or disease level. But when you start to pull them all together, we focus, for example, on all pediatric epilepsy, all cardiomyopathies, neuromuscular diseases, rare hematological diseases. What we try to avoid is having this very sporadic data set where we did one little project for this pharma company over here that's maybe in diabetes. We did another project over here in early breast cancer. Because when you look at that aggregated data, it neither solves Nasha's problem of like, hey, how do I learn from patients similar to myself dealing with similar challenges? And it doesn't help the researcher's problem who first wants to understand FOXG1, but then walk up the tree and say, now, how do we use that to understand Parkinson's? Or how do we use that to understand broader dementia? And so we really take a very deliberate approach of understanding those individual areas. So when we put them together, we can now start to shine a light on much, much more complex conditions that impact hundreds of millions of people. So I think the place that we start is, again, what can we do that's going to help patients and caregivers directly, help navigate their day-to-day? And so some of what we have spent many years solving for, and we've done successfully, is how do we get all of the data about you? How do we structure and normalize that information? How do we effectively create almost a digital version of you, through data, so we understand everything about Peter, about Nasha, about Farid? The next step now is how do we use that understanding we have about you to be able to provide you with relevant insights based on other people in your community? How do we use that to be able to provide better next steps in terms of where you might be in your journey and what you might need to navigate next? So I think a big piece of what we're focused on from the funding is really to be able to accelerate our roadmap on our patient application, what we are doing to be able to, again, leverage AI and leverage all of this data to provide a much more streamlined experience for patients navigating those day-to-day challenges. And then the second piece, and I'll let Nasha pick this up, is with the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative with CZI, a big part of their Rare as One program is around getting more patient advocacy groups clinical trial ready. And so, Nasha, maybe you can pick that up and talk through the drug development side.
Yeah, their Rare as One program is focused on working directly with patient advocacy groups. It's one of the only really donors that does that and gives grants directly to patient advocacy groups. And they have noticed that the patient advocacy groups are missing rich natural history studies. That has been a real deficit. And so our partnership with them is to work with these groups, help them build these natural history studies, but then also partner with them to understand who are the researchers that should be able to access the data, who could publish on your natural history study, as an example. So really helping them get their information out. We're starting, they've made an investment, as well as we have this partnership, and we're going to start with a limited set of cohorts and hopefully expand out from that. But in addition to that, what they're really excited about goes to what Farid says, which is, what are all the analytical tools that we can create on top of the data that can help these advocacy groups as they're managing their own patients and their own communities? And so we're going to be really focused on that as well moving forward. I would just say that I am really excited about where we are within rare diseases compared to even when I started my journey. I feel like we're in a kind of a perfect, really wonderful storm, right? Where we have amazing innovation coming out of the agency. I think the agency is really opening up to rare diseases, and they're open to using different forms of data in lieu of traditional methods for rare diseases. We're already seeing accelerated approval, go through with different conditions. So I'm excited of just what we're seeing with the regulatory landscape there. And then I'm excited about the technologies that have been coming down the pipeline with genetic therapies, with antisense oligonucleotides, now with gene editing. When Amara was diagnosed, my neurologist told me, just forget it, because it's going to take a couple decades before you could really have anything curative. And that is just not true, right? 7 years later, we're about to take a gene replacement therapy into the clinic. And so I think we have these technologies coming down the pipeline. And then I'm also seeing a lot of activity in the patient advocacy space where patients are getting together because of the increased rate of diagnoses. You have a lot more patients that are getting diagnosed. You have professional parents, professional patients with backgrounds that they're now bringing to drug development and are forming these groups. And so this sort of trifecta of what I'm seeing is really leading to more and more opportunities in the rare disease space. And so I think we're going to see an acceleration of technologies being actually used to treat patient symptoms. And that gives me a lot of hope. We had a really exciting conversation with the agency on even using platforms like Citizen to follow patients long-term for gene therapies, which are a real problem for sponsors and for advocacy groups. So again, we're just seeing a lot of innovation in the space. And I'm excited to be alive at this time.
You know, we've been talking about personalized care, precision medicine for a really long time. And you hear this from many people that enter the healthcare space that, hey, why isn't my healthcare experience like how I watch movies or how I shop online or what my banking experience is like? Like, why don't I have that personalized experience in healthcare? And the two factors that you need in order to be able to do that is, one, you need a direct relationship with the patient, and you need to understand enough about them so you can actually personalize that experience. So we always say that if you believe in personalized care and precision medicine, eventually everything is a rare disease because there's only one of you and there's only one of me. And so we think that the way that we'll be able to drive this personalized consumer experience in healthcare has to start in rare disease, but it's something that is needed in every single part of the healthcare ecosystem. And so I think we're finally seeing all those pieces come together of consumers being, patients, families being much more engaged, the ability to actually collate all of this data, and then technologies and the advancements in AI to actually be able to make sense of that data in a much more effective and streamlined way, where eventually every patient with any condition at any stage of their journey will have exactly the guidance and the next steps that they need that are personalized to them. And that's really the vision that we're building towards.